Hello folks, my name is Shaw with Royal Tiger Imports, and today I'm here to show you all a variety of M95 rifles and carbines that we have available on our website. As you may know, we are doing some warehouse clearance sales on a variety of models such as our Enfields, the number 4s and number 1s, as well as Vetterli 7087, the 10.4 millimeter black powder cartridge rifles. We're doing quite a variety of clearance sales in anticipation of a large shipment out of Ethiopia that'll be arriving here very soon. And the M95s are next on the list. Right in front of me, I have closest to me two M95 long rifles. These are in their original condition, unmodified, including unmodified from their original caliber. These are still in their 8x50, not the later 8x56 Spitzer cartridge. And in front of me, a little bit farther down, I've got two Ethiopian modified M95 rifles where they took a very similar to this full-length M95 rifle and they shortened it down to a very similar to a factory carbine length, but they do vary a little bit. You'll see that they vary to where some of them look pretty identical to a carbine. It's a little bit hard to tell the difference sometimes, except you can tell towards the muzzle end where it was modified. And then some are a little bit longer. Say they have about 6 or 8 inches, a little bit longer than a factory carbine, but still shorter than a factory rifle. You can always tell as well when it's a little bit longer and it still retains that factory long ladder rear sight. And then finally in front of me here, we've got the factory carbines. I've got one that has the shorter rear sight, as well as the farthest one has a factory rifle sight that was then properly converted into a carbine. So without further ado, let's get a closer look at these and I'll show you all the exact details. All right, folks, let's take a closer look at these M95 rifles and carbines. Starting with the regular rifle at the top here, you can see that this is in pretty decent condition overall. Of course, it does have some surface wear on the metal and wood. However, with these warehouse clearance sales, specifically on the 95 rifles, these are going to be in a little bit better condition compared to some of the other clearance specials. So meaning that these will have, generally speaking, less damage to the wood, less overall pitting, and less missing parts. Of course, at the end of the day, these are very old rifles. These have seen an extensive service life, so they are not new by any means. However, they're in pretty great shape for their age. You can see this one also features an AOI stamp, which means that it was used by the Italians in Ethiopia from roughly 1935 to 1941. And moving on to this lower one here, you can see that if we rotate this up just ever so slightly, they do have some small cracks in the upper handguard, but generally speaking, that is the extent of the wood damage, besides a possible very small crack near the wrist at the rear of the receiver. But generally speaking, there are no large cracks on these, and they are certainly a great starting point for a restoration project. And we'll go back to the receiver here. You can see that this particular one is made by Steyr. This appears to have a 1915 barrel date. And there are some also manufactured by Budapest, but the vast majority are Steyr. Moving on to our next M95s, these two here are the Ethiopian modified rifles that were turned into carbines. So, as you can see here, we'll start off with our factory rifle rear sight. Now, it is worth noting that there are some factory carbines that do have a proper rear sight where it was factory done, but it still has a what would be considered a standard rifle rear sight. However, if we look at this a little bit closer, you can see that this, and it's very hard to tell because this one was actually done rather nicely, but the end of the muzzle has been cut off at a very slight angle, as well as the front end of the rifle has been rather irregularly modified. And you can see on the carbines in particular, they may have some more wood damage Just certainly take note of the description as we list out everything that we can try to take note of. And you can see on this one in particular, it does have a little crack at the wrist behind there. And let's move on to our second Ethiopian modified one. This one is a little bit more obvious. As you can see, there is a greater distance in between the front and rear barrel band, which is irregular considering most of the time that distance is slightly shorter. And you can also see it's a little more crystal clear where the modification was done. You can see the front sight is just ever so slightly off kilter, and the muzzle crown has been clearly hand modified at some point. But if you back out and you look at a carbine, particularly this actual factory 95 carbine here, you can see at a distance it's quite close, but nevertheless, this did start out as a factory rifle and was not modified by the Steyr or Budapest arsenal, but was rather modified in Ethiopia. And while we're here, let's take a look at these markings. You can see this one is also a Steyr M95. And some of them do have heavier wear on the markings than others. These ones in particular happen to have their manufacturer quite visible. And finally, let's move on to these factory carbines down here. You can see this factory carbine is, of course, a Steyr. Like I mentioned previously, that is certainly the most common manufacturer. And it does have some small dings, dents, scratches, missing parts, such as a screw. As well as if we pan back over here, you can see on the underside of the stock, it is missing a sling swivel. This is somewhat common on the carbines that we're doing a warehouse clearance special of. And finally, moving on to our last carbine, the first thing we'll take note of is, as you can see, on some of the factory carbines, they have a front sight mount band that encircles the barrel, while other factory-built carbines have a mount that is either silver soldered on or turned with part of the barrel when it's manufactured. And you can see on this rear sight, this is a shorter carbine rear sight, which is one of the two styles that is proper. You can see this one is much shorter. And finally, moving on here, you can see this one is a little bit more worn, but this was a Budapest at one point. And of course, as mentioned previously, they do have some damage on the wood, but nonetheless, it can be worked with. And lastly, you can see a faint AOI stamp. You will also sometimes see other stamps such as Ethiopian police or anything similar. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for your business. God bless.